Okay, I think we'll start, and then I'll just continue. I'll just let people in as they come in. So thanks for everyone for coming to the session this afternoon. Machine learning gone wrong, giving up your afternoons, and special thanks to Emmanuel for putting it together for us. Really appreciate it. Manuel's got over 10 years experience. He's going to be talking through, I think, some instances from your career, sort of where machine learning has not been implemented correctly, where companies have gone wrong, and how to prevent that. I think, I'll hand over to Emmanuel to do the heavy lifting on this, and you can sort of outline, how the session's going to go and what you're sort of going to cover. So yeah, I'll hand over to Emmanuel.
Yeah, just trying to let people in. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there's a few more in now. I'll monitor that. So
cool. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. Let me share my screen. I have a little presentation. So it'd be good if you can let me know if you can see it.
That's all good from my side.
Cool.
I think what we'll do is, if everyone could mute their mics for the time being. If you want to ask a question, just unmute, just so we can avoid sort of continuous background noise and things like that. But yeah, feel free. I think if people want to sort of chime in with a question or any sort of different perspective, we're happy to do that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah. So I'll start. Yeah. So you can see the title of the talk is Machine Learning Gone Wrong, and I'm very sad about it, as you can see. So yeah, it's I want to tell the other side of the story, right? So we can learn from mistakes, from problems. So it's not always this rosy image of AI taking over the world and all of that. So someone saying anything now? Okay, yeah. So this talk is for about half an hour, and then we have a lot of time to discuss, to hear experiences. If you want to just unmute yourselves in the middle and ask a question, that's fine too. So of course, machine learning is everywhere, so we can't deny that it's very important. This is just an example of I think someone needs to mute themselves.
Yeah, sorry, if everyone could just mute their mics as well, please. Just, I think it's Gangle.
Strategy of this company for the next 10 years, and I'm super.
That's what I can do.
Yeah, so this is Gmail guessing the next word as I'm typing. You can see guess the word attachment. This is Netflix making some personalized recommendations for me, and this is Amazon recommending me products, and all of this is the product of machine learning, right? So a computer has learned stuff to make these recommendations, and it's everywhere, right? So for the first time in history, actually, AI becomes part of our daily lives. So that's undeniable. But behind every successful machine learning project, there are many that don't go so well, okay? And you don't hear about those very often, and that's what I want to talk about today. I'll be using the terms AI and ML as if they were the same thing. Machine learning is the type of artificial intelligence that is used nowadays, the one that's making headlines, but I would just use the two words as if they were the same thing. And before we start, I'll be sharing my experience working in data science. So that's where we use machine learning for business, right? To make an impact in business. I'm saying this because machine learning is used for other things, right? We've seen some advances of machine learning for playing games and lots of academic applications, but I'll be focusing on the data science side. I will tell you a lot of controversial stories. All of them are real. I will change some details so you can't really identify my clients. I will not name names, but they are all, unfortunately, they're all true. And I worked for about 9 years now in data science as an employee, then as a consultant. So I've seen a lot of different stuff in different industries. And my hypothesis is that AI projects that go wrong tend to follow a 5-step recipe. We can think of a 5-step recipe for disaster. I invented this recipe, okay? So I saw that there's kind of 5 really clearly identifiable steps in those projects that tend to fail. So in my talk today, I'll just go through those 5 with examples so that we see what's going on. The first one, step 1, I call it putting the cart before the horse, right? So doing things in the wrong order. And that happens when companies decide to use AI before knowing what they'll use it for. And that happens quite a lot. For example, someone approached me and said, I like cars and AI seems trendy. So what could I do with AI in the automotive sector? Right? So this person knew that, so he just wanted to use AI in something he liked, right? Instead of having first a problem and then finding the solution that could be AI or not. So the solution comes before the problem, right? And this is what I call putting the cart before the horse. This is engineering and entrepreneurship upside down, right? So if you ask anyone, an engineer or an investor, they will tell you, first you find a problem, you identify the problem, and then you find a solution for it, right? So this is kind of doing things the other way around. I'll give you 2 examples. I have quite a lot of examples, but I'll give you 2 examples of this kind of thing. So the first one is a consulting company that I met who specializes in reinforcement learning, which is a specific type of machine learning. So they're very narrow. They specialize in one type of machine learning, and they try to push it everywhere, right? So they want to find things to do with machine learning. And they told a large airline, one of the most important airlines in Europe, that they could optimize their advertising with reinforcement learning. And they sold it very, very well to the airline. It just sold this super fancy methodology that could just achieve great things for advertising at the airline. And they signed an expensive consulting deal with this consulting agency. So that was, yeah, that was very, very good news. And I joined that project to, in a short contract, to build the first prototype of this solution. And I was quite surprised because I found out that they didn't know which problem to solve, or even which advertising channel to focus on. They didn't even have KPIs. There was absolutely no definition of what to do with reinforcement learning. So they managed to sell the methodology to the airline, strike a very big deal just by saying this is going to save your life, without actually specifying what to do with it. So they were in trouble, actually. They had to now find something to do with reinforcement learning. So the managers of the company, they came up with the following idea. They said, let's use reinforcement learning to allocate more budget to winning ads on Facebook, right? So when an ad is performing better on Facebook ads, we're gonna allocate more budget to it, which is basically what Facebook already does. So if you've studied this kind of thing, you would know that Facebook uses this flavor of reinforcement learning to allocate more budget, more money to the highest performing ads. And they have a lot of data that we didn't have. So we would never be able to beat Facebook. This deal, so COVID ended up canceling this, this project. And I think it was a blessing in disguise because it was not going to end well. So this is a clear example of putting the cart before the horse. Another example, I'm telling this one because it's a little bit funny, the position I found myself in. This is a company that created a team with the goal of promoting the use of AI in the organization. So it was an official cart before horse team. What this team did was interview different other teams in the company and tell them how they could use AI for stuff, right? So they were biased toward finding AI's use cases, right? And things weren't going well. So some people in the company suspected this team was having some issues and they had political problems, so they couldn't fix it, right? So there was very little they could do to change the way things work in the team. So they sent me to spy on the team and influence them. So basically, I was a sort of spy, but I didn't know it. So they hired me to provide some technical support, to just do some Python engineering. And I was supposed to pretend to do that. And in the meantime, inform on the team to others and say what was going on, which was quite a surprise to me to find myself in that situation. What I found right away, actually, I left this deal this position very soon because it was not very fulfilling to do this. But what I found was that they were doing what one could expect from this sort of cart before horse team. They were building prototypes to prove that AI was worth using, right? And they were not very good prototypes, right? Because it's better to do something fast and wrong and prove your point than to be very thorough and do the due diligence necessary to prove AI's work. And also, they were purchasing long-term licenses to external software, external AI software, kind of lock themselves in. So lots of problems, but all of this was because I think of the cart before horse situation and the existence of the team depending on finding AI use cases. So this team couldn't justify its own existence if it didn't prove that AI could be used for stuff. So they had to prove it. And so why does this happen, the cart before horse thing? I think there's a number of things. One of them is funding. There's tax breaks, grants, etc. for using AI, or for saying you're using AI. Just having the label AI gains startups' attention from investors. Some companies have been caught red-handed pretending to use AI when they weren't. And just for example, yesterday I went to a trade show in London in Excel about e-commerce, and I was speaking with an exhibitor in the show, and he said that someone told him like half an hour ago that he should say he was using AI, even if he wasn't, because everybody was doing that in the trade show. So a way to get attention, a way to attract employees. Another story from myself, once a company flew me in for an interview. This was in a very remote city where the sun doesn't rise in winter, very north. It was for a job in AI. And I went through a couple of rounds of interviews remotely, and then they flew me in. And when I landed there, I found out that the job didn't involve any AI. They said that if they did anything with AI in the future, I would be the right person, but they were not going to do it before that. And I think that was because they were struggling to find people for software engineering roles who wanted to move to that place, who wanted to relocate. So they just spruced it up a little, made it a bit more interesting. But it's also not always a cynical thing, right? It's not a way to get money or attention. I think that a lot of people actually believe that AI is a silver bullet that can do anything, sometimes the impossible. And I'll give you one example of that because we'll speak about this in a minute. So it was a company that was having the issue of, let's say they were a telecommunications company, and sometimes people booked an appointment with the cable guy and the client didn't answer the door. So the cable guy would go there, knock on the door, and nobody would answer. This is obviously a problem, and it was happening more than they wanted that to happen. So a group of analysts said, so they investigated the issue and they found no common patterns. They found that there was no way to predict that someone wouldn't open the door. So someone in the company said, okay, then we need to use AI, right? So AI will then solve this. So they thought that the impossible thing that analysts, couldn't solve, then AI would be able to fix this and find some magical pattern to predict when someone wouldn't answer the door. So yeah, that's the cart before horse. I have suggested solution for it. This is my humble opinion. So I think we should be engineers. We should find the best solution to an existing problem, not the other way around. The solution may or may not be machine learning. We may even use machine learning in a basic way at first and then improve it to follow a lean process. So this is my 2 cents regarding this cart before horse. Some people don't agree with me. A couple of days ago, someone told me that they thought that if you have very good AI people in a company, if you have a lot of very smart AI people with PhDs, he was saying, then you should give them money so that they try to do stuff with AI and find problems to solve. But I haven't seen that succeed. So in my case, I've always seen this, be the first step in the recipe for disaster. But yeah, we can have a discussion about this later. And that brings us to step number 2. This is when companies make mistakes when building something in machine learning and they don't realize it. And you may be wondering, how can anyone build a product that is broken and not know it? Okay, and that's something very specific to machine learning that's very, very interesting. So in traditional software development, if you make a tiny mistake, everything tends to collapse, right? We get a blue screen, you know, computer catching fire. Not always, but it's very often, very common that we have a bug, right, and everything collapses. In machine learning, it's the other way around. You make a tiny mistake, and everything looks better than it actually is. And this probably happens more than in any other field. The reason being that machine learning tries to find patterns in data, right? Actively tries to find patterns in data. So if you make a mistake, for example, you give the machine the wrong data or data it shouldn't be seeing, then it will still find patterns, except that they're not useful, right? So it's very, very common to build something broken and not know it. And I'll show you 2 examples of this. So the first one is the cable installer that we spoke about a minute ago. So if you remember, this company thought that AI could do the impossible. And they thought, yeah, let's build a machine learning model to predict if someone will answer the door or not. Again, this is a true story, okay? So they had a data set that looked like this. So it was a historical data set with information about visits, about the client, the location, the square footage of the house, the client type, and whether they answer the door or not. And they built a machine learning model to predict this, okay? And it seemed to work great. That was the fantastic news. So we could see that when the model said yes, it was usually a yes. When the model said no, it was usually a no. So finally, they would be able to predict the impossible. And at this point is when they hired me to improve this prototype and promote it within the organization. So I decided to inspect it a little bit, to look inside the model, which is sometimes something data scientists do, but sometimes they don't. We just skip this step. But I smelled something fishy, so I said, I need to know how the model is actually giving these outputs. So what I found out is that the rule that the model was relying on the most to make predictions was if the client type is empty, as we can see here, right? So there's 2 cases where we don't have a client type. If the client type is empty, then the client won't answer the door, as we can see here. And this looked really weird to me. I thought, how could the fact of not having a client type predict whether they will answer the door or not? And why do we even not have a client type? And this was a problem of data contamination or data leakage in reality. So what happened was that when the door wasn't answered, the person who prepared this data set was someone different from the one who prepared the data for when the door was answered. And they used an outdated database of clients. So the person for the no cases used an old database, which means that the client type was empty more often when it was no, right? So the model was cheating to make predictions, right? It was using a sneaky rule that cannot be reproduced in reality, right? So we can't, when we go and use this model, we can know which database to use for client information, right? Based on whether they will answer the door or not. You need to pick one. But in this case, the model was cheating. And I'm sure that the data scientists in this call have seen things like this. In this case, we found out early what was going on. I mean, not that early because they hired me. And and when I fixed this, the model was as bad as tossing a coin, basically. So we couldn't actually predict if people would answer the door. But it wasn't too late. We didn't actually use this model for anything. This isn't always the case. In some cases, errors can go unnoticed for years. And I will tell you an example now of something that went wrong for years. This was the botched A/B testing. So this company was trying to use machine learning to identify the best product and show it at the top of the search results when clients were trying to find, let's say, a flight. So as you can see here, this flight search engine shows me the best flight on top, not always the cheapest one. In this case, the best flight is a direct flight, no stops. So it's showing it on top, even though it's more expensive. And the company developed machine learning that learned from past experience to do this. But they needed to test this to see whether it was adding business value or not. So they did typical A/B testing. So they split the users in two groups, 50% and 50%. 50% of the users were shown the machine learning recommendations with the best product at the top. The other 50%, they saw a naive algorithm that always showed the cheapest product at the top. And the plan was to see which one generated more revenue. And it turned out to be the machine learning one that generated much more money. And we're talking millions, right? And this result was promoted a lot within the organization about how machine learning was great. But it turns out that things weren't actually that good. So the company didn't split clients randomly because they wanted to avoid poor user experience. So if you land on the website and you're shown either version at random, whenever you go back, you see maybe different results, right? And that's not good for user experience to have the flights switch positions. So what they did is they split their cities randomly, the city from where a person was visiting the website. So some visitors from certain cities were shown the machine learning version, and people from other cities were shown the cheapest product version. And because people are not moving cities all the time, a person from the same city would get to see the same thing all the time when visiting the website. Unfortunately, and this was very, very unlucky, the way they split this ended up putting wealthiest cities in the machine learning version. So we had the machine learning version of the website with visitors from, let's say, Monte Carlo, Zurich, Luxembourg, South Kensington, Cannes. And then you had the not machine learning version, from people from beautiful cities, but not as wealthy as the other ones. So now we couldn't know if the people from this side of the story, they actually converted more, they bought more because they were wealthier, or because the machine learning is actually doing its job. So this is similar to a botched vaccine trial where you give the vaccine to smokers and the placebo to non-smokers, but then you really can't draw any conclusions on the vaccine. And this botched experiment went on for 2.5 years. And it was used a lot to grow the team, to promote machine learning in the organization, and tell to the whole company and the rest of the world. And machine learning was adding a lot of money. But it was maybe because people from Zurich and Monte Carlo were the ones who ended up using a machine learning version. So my suggested solution for this, for step 2 of the recipe, is a very clean validation process. So there's a whole body of literature in machine learning which suggests ways in which we can properly validate the model, how we can use independent data. So I'm not going to explain it here, but there's a lot that has been said about how you should validate models. And I think it's very, very good to do it in a very clean way. Step 3, explosive growth. I will go very fast over this step. So my experience tells me that at the smallest hint of machine learning success, some companies go overboard. So the moment they see that it kind of looks like it's working, maybe because there was some mistake, right, that they didn't notice, they just start hiring people and going crazy, right? One example is the Bosch A/B test that I just mentioned. That was, the one that was sending machine learning to people from Zurich. The team who developed this was just 2 people within another team that tried this out. After the company saw how amazing the results were, they created a dedicated team for this use case, and they grew it from 2 to 13 people in 1 year. So they go from 2 people to 13 in 1 year, which is quite a lot for something that just looked promising in the beginning. Especially that it was promising, but not necessarily for the right reason. Another company I work with built a team of 10 after one prototype's minor success. So there was a tiny little prototype that seemed to work well, and just let's build a team of 10. Another example is a company that spent £1 million for feature engineering before fully validating the product. So for those who don't work in machine learning, feature engineering is the step where we prepare the data for machine learning, right? Where we create some new type of data, sometimes in really creative ways. But in general, you want first to create a model that you're sure will work, even if it doesn't have very sophisticated feature engineering before spending so much money. This company just went all in and spent a lot of money, and then it was a mystery whether machine learning would work or not. Another example, last week, a company called me for a job. So they were looking for data scientists, and they told me they were building a team of 10 people to finish up a proof of concept and take it to the next level. And I was a bit surprised at the wording, and I asked, what do you mean to finish up the proof of concept? And they said, yeah, we haven't finished, but we believe, so the company believes that AI is going to work. So they don't want to wait to see if the proof of concept actually proves the concept, and they just want to build a team, and they're looking to hire, data scientists, data engineers, product managers. But again, that was a bit surprising, because to me, a proof of concept is something built by two people, and then once you prove it, then you go on. But yeah, my suggested solution is to have a lean approach. Take a baby step, prove the business value, iterate. I think we've all heard about this lean approach. And yeah, so maybe I'll keep going. I don't know if does anyone want to add anything at this point, or do you want me to finish the 5 steps and then we discuss? Nope. Okay.
I'm happy for you to keep going.
Cool. The next step, step 4, is I call it lies, and I have a very sad face there, as you can see, because I don't like it, but unfortunately, this happens sometimes. So as you can imagine, if a team prematurely grows to 10 people or more, but things don't go their way, telling the truth may not be the preferred course of action. Right? So this is a classy way of trying to say that a lot of companies start to lie when they realize that things are not going their way. You can imagine the botched A/B test that I told you that was used to promote AI in the business, and they grew the team to 13 people. What do you think happened when they realized that maybe machine learning was actually not the reason why these people were buying more? What if it was because it was people from Switzerland? So as you can imagine, things weren't very pretty, because a lot of people were hired for this, and people don't want to lose their jobs. They're not going to recommend to the CEO, oh, by the way, this is not working, so just let's scrap the project. So unfortunately, I have too many examples of this, but I will tell you one specific example of how far the lies can go at this stage. So to me, this is a stellar example, and I call it the mini Theranos. Theranos was the company that was building this device to test blood in the US, right? That was director was convicted for fraud early this year. And in this company, well, obviously it's not as big because this was a smaller team, but it behaved in ways that remind me of the Theranos story. In Theranos, they didn't let employees speak with anyone outside the company. They censored their communication. They read their emails. And I unfortunately went through a story like that myself. So I wanted to share it here, obviously changing the names and stuff. So this is a company that wanted to use machine learning to make recommendations to executives for important business decisions, right? This is a bit of a step 1 here, cart before horse, right? Because someone came up with the idea AI should be used to help the senior level executives in the company. But there wasn't a specific use case that needed to be solved. So a data scientist built a half-baked prototype, say something that looked like a solution, but kind of halfway, and he actually left the company. This was, again, step 2. Now we build a prototype that doesn't actually work very well. We think it works well. Step 3, the company hired 10 people to build the final product. Again, step 3 now. We have the explosive growth of a team for this AI use case. I joined quite late in the project, so I came as a consultant to improve some of the code, make it faster. But I saw what was going on, and it wasn't very pleasant. So for the team, it became clear very soon that the product would never work, right? So There were many reasons, but one of them was that it required data that didn't exist and that we couldn't obtain, and there were some other problems. So the idea, this original prototype, was making lots of assumptions of things that could be obtained, but we couldn't in the end, right? It was very, very difficult to find a solution to this. So the recommendations that were outputted for this AI system were quite nonsensical, and it was visible. You could see that it recommended to do things that didn't make much sense. So what the team was doing a little bit before I joined was to add a layer to override bad outputs. So when the AI outputted something that didn't make much sense, there was a sort of override done in a bit of an elegant way. No one knew, so the users of the system didn't know that this was happening. But the worst part is that they overrode things with whatever executives wanted to hear. So the philosophy in this team was, when the recommendation doesn't make any sense, and we can't get it to make any sense, let's just output something that is exactly what the executive is planning to do, right? Executives were very happy with this because they were going to make a decision, and they saw that the AI supported the decision a lot of the time, but it was obviously very, very shady. And we actually had meetings with executives, and I was in those meetings, and sometimes executives disagreed with a recommendation made by the AI. They said something like, oh, why is this contradicting me? Why is the AI saying I should do this when a week ago I told the CEO I would do the other thing? So my boss would say, oh no, we probably have a bug somewhere. So then we fixed the AI, which meant to actually change the overrides in the outputs to produce what the executives wanted to hear. And after a while, the AI wasn't used at all, right? But it was still executed. So we hired those expensive AWS servers because it was a huge system to run the whole thing. But then all the outputs were ignored, and they were overridden with what executives wanted to hear, which is pretty sad. At one point, employees complained about this to the product managers, right? They were saying, what are we doing? We can't do this. And the product managers repeated a sort of mantra saying, we said we could do this a year ago, so now we can't say it's not possible. And they repeated this as if it was a universal truth, that when you say you can do something, you can't a year later say, actually, we realized we can't. So this was part of the culture in the company. They didn't let us speak directly with the executives. And once it happened to me that an executive who used the tool sent me an email to ask about a technical thing, like for instance, how can I save this to a file, something very silly. So I replied the email, and I was scolded for it. So the managers of my team, they told me that I shouldn't do that. I'm not allowed to speak with them because they were afraid we would kind of reveal what was going on. And they kept growing the team despite knowing the product would never work, right? So the step three, the previous step of explosive growth in the team doesn't stop when people realize AI isn't working, because then it's kind of acknowledging that, you know, to the rest of the company that things weren't as great as you said initially, because all of a sudden you don't want more budget or more employees. So step 4 doesn't end, step 3. And just as a final anecdote of this mini Theranos, one day they asked me to give a talk to explain how the product worked to some people in the company. The product managers fine code my slides, right? So they literally went word by word, they changed some little words here and there to avoid any revelations of the truth. But I threw a really killer presentation, I think, with all full buzzwords, you know, big data, data science, AI, optimization, deep learning, anything you can imagine. And someone was very impressed and sent an email across the company saying that our team, we were rocket scientists. And this was about the time Elon Musk SpaceX launched this rocket to space, and everybody was speaking about Elon Musk. So I think this is where it came from. But it made me laugh because the product was completely broken. It was complete fabrication, and they thought it was rocket science. And I'm telling you this because a lot of people in this call, they're not machine learning people, right? So they're business people. And I want you to know that sometimes when people in AI, they present their work to you, they are not necessarily always 100% honest about how it works. And because very few people actually understand AI, it's very easy to, fiddle with the truth a little. So solutions to this that I could suggest, well, maybe a change in the culture. Maybe it should be okay to admit that you made a mistake. Avoid getting here, right? So what happened in this company is that they follow all the steps in the recipe for disaster, right? They weren't cautious, they grew the team, they threw a lot of money at it, they trusted that this little prototype would work in more general case. So let's try to avoid getting here. Remember, it's hard to know AI's performance, hard to know how AI is performing, right? When you build an app and it crashes, you know it crashed. With AI, usually the data scientists themselves report how it works, right? The same people who build the system, they tell you how good it is. So just beware that sometimes that doesn't go very well. And final step, and I'll be very quick here, silent implosion. So in all these projects that I've seen not go very well, they end up in a sort of silent implosion. So at some point, people see that there isn't much bang for the AI buck, right? They see that all this investment and all these people, and they keep saying that it works. You know, the data scientists keep showing you how everything's amazing and how the rocket scientists, but then you can tell at the end of the day that it's not bringing so much value. So they decide to, scale down. There's downsizing. I've seen once a team downgraded to maintenance tasks only without any innovation. So they told these people, from now on, you can't build anything new. You can just maintain what you've done. That was very boring. So everybody resigned almost, including the team leader and the person who replaced the team leader. And then they ended up scrapping the team when there was no one left. But the thing is, no one announces any of this to the world, right? Which is known as survivorship bias, right? We hear about the success cases. We don't hear about any of the failures. And sometimes we actually hear about the failed projects, but we don't hear about the failure part. So we hear that company invested this many millions in AI, but no one tells us if it actually worked. And that leads to unreasonable expectations about AI. And that leads back to step one, where we end up putting the cart before the horse because we think AI is going to be some sort of silver bullet. And that's the end of my 5-step cycle of doom and misery in AI. So yeah, thank you for your attention. I would like if you have any questions, like to know if you have any questions or experiences you want to share, or maybe terrible projects you worked on or wonderful projects. That's my LinkedIn handler down there. So feel free to add me if you want to discuss afterward. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Manuel. That was really interesting. I'm a data scientist by background, and everything you said I've seen in one form or another. It's quite depressing in a comical way. I like you dealt it quite lightheartedly, but I see it. I've seen it a lot and experienced it a lot. So yeah.
Yeah. How often?
Yeah, I think quite a few times. I think I think one of the biggest things I've experienced is the solution being put first without being clear. What is the benefit? What is the use case? Where will it be used? How will you measure it? But it was a really great talk. I enjoyed it. I'll certainly connect with you.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that you connect with this talk.
I thought it was interesting, actually, the bit you said about when it's the clarity and the realization that it's not going to work, it probably will never work. How would you go about that if you've been brought in to make the AI work? Because it almost makes you I guess obsolete, or it puts you in a difficult position. How would you approach that if you would just be straight up saying it's not going to work? Or it's interesting how you'd approach that.
Yeah, well, in one case, for instance, in which it worked very well, and I think my biggest learning was that it's great to bring a solution, not just sit there and complain and say, oh, this is broken, it's never going to work. To go and say, I think this is, because people just don't listen, right? They if you say that, but if you bring a solution, you say, hey, this doesn't work, but if we did it this way, we may be able to fix it. That's when I've I've had a better reaction from companies, and we've managed to actually fix things and take a better direction.
Sure. It's interesting you said about the lies segment when you went onto that topic and you were starting to say that. I started thinking before you got into it, you know, I'm a humble recruiter. I don't have the experiences you guys have, what I can relate that to. And the first thing I thought was that Theranos documentary as soon as you mentioned it. And then, but behold, next slide, that was your example. So I watched that. It was very interesting.
I haven't seen it. Is it good?
Really? Yeah, no, I liked it a lot. It's crazy. Well, that's obviously at an incredibly high scale, isn't it? Because they're a billion-dollar company that effectively they knew the product was not going to work and couldn't work, and trying to cover up the cracks, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pretty sad. Yeah, but it happens. Yeah. I never thought I would find myself in a situation like that, but it was, yeah, it happened to me. Not at that scale, but you know, I saw some things that I wish I hadn't seen. Yeah.
Has anyone else got any questions for Emmanuel? Any perspectives that they'd like to add, sort of from their experience? Or I know there's some more junior people in who maybe looking to get into machine learning. Anyone got anything to ask Emmanuel? Or
yeah, Emmanuel, this is Richard here. First and foremost, thank you so much for this eye-opening presentation. This is probably one of the best machine learning webinars that I've attended, because it actually is very hard-hitting and explains like what real life things that you can happen, because this concept of buzzwords have been there for like as long as software engineering is there. And previously there was this huge buzz about big data, trying to implement big data into almost everything. Then now it is like trying to implement AI, deep learning, neural nets into almost everything. So basically, like some of the solutions can be simply done by basic automation or some ETL tools. And then many of these product managers, to show to the executives, they use a cannon to kill a mosquito, to be very honest. But one of the most eye-opening thing that you told in the Theranos kind of mini Theranos example is that adding a layer on the machine learning or deep learning, whatever implementation, to kind of give answers that the CEOs want to hear. That is one of the most shocking, and I kind of started laughing when seeing that. I like to what extent people can go to kind of hack the machine learning algorithm. Because I have heard some stuff similar to these in a lot of companies. They do happen, and I do not want to take any names, but sometimes like there are investment banks and all who create certain forecasting models, but then they add their own ad hoc parameters because some expert has told so. Without any kind of, it's plain heuristics, but mostly like gut feeling. Like, okay, the parameter should be X, but no, I should add X plus 3 square. So, I mean, now the rationale behind it, nobody knows, but that is pretty eye-opening. And actually it can, as you showed, in the long run, can wreak havoc. So this is pretty good. And also the part where the ML algorithm was showing the best rates for the more expensive countries, because the rich people live there. So that is another way to hack into the system to get more business out of it. That was pretty eye-opening.
That was an accident though, so they didn't do it on purpose.
Yes, I completely agree with you.
But when they found out that that was probably going on, there was some resistance to change it, right? You can imagine.
Yep, human inertia to change. Never they don't want to change when the ball is rolling. So completely.
Is that sort of like for A/B testing, you would need to control all variables then in order to get a clear picture, because you need it to be A or B. It can't be there's certain variables that are different for one side and the other, because you don't know, you can't attribute. I guess.
The best way is to do it randomly, right? Just to assign, like in a vaccine trial, you just assign people randomly. When you can do that, as it was the case here, you need to be very careful in how you do the assignment, because you want to avoid what's called a confounding factor. And in this case, the wealth of the city is a confounding factor. So if you have an equal amount of, wealthy cities and not wealthy cities in each of the two buckets, then that's fine. And in fact, it's quite unfortunate that this happened by accident, right? Because it was just a very, very unfortunate split of the data. But yeah, you need to be very careful. Yeah, definitely. When doing experiments like this.
Sure. But see, Chandran's asked in the chat, I think taking advantage of the senior figures here, asking how you would suggest to get a job in machine learning without previous experience. So I don't suppose you've got any insights on that?
Yeah, well, first you should do my course. I have a course on Udemy that you should take. That's my self-promotion, because I built a course specifically for, to help people land jobs or learn the things that are needed to land a job. So I think that I've seen a lot people switch fields in data science, right? So it's not a regulated profession like being a lawyer. So I've had former colleagues that were physicists, accountants, civil engineers. They were from all sorts of backgrounds. I think what I've seen best is when someone within their previous job, they do a little project, for example, or something with machine learning, even if that's not the job title, and then you showcase that in your resume, right? So that's all you need to kind of get attention on your CV by saying, I used machine learning for this in this project, even if that was not your title, even if it's a fake project that you did on Kaggle, but just tell the company that you know the basics of machine learning, you know how it works, and you've done something useful with it. And that will help you, I think, stand out just to get an interview, which is what you want. So you don't want to get a job, you want to get an interview. I always say that, okay? Because in the data science interview process, there's usually, they will test your knowledge. There will be some sort of quiz for machine learning, but then they will send you a project to solve, right? And then you have to hand in some Jupyter notebook with, and they give you data usually for a task. So they actually assess your data science skills, even if you don't have experience. What's hard is to get that initial interview, right? Where people don't necessarily they don't see any experience in you. So why will they even send you the quiz? So yeah, your priority should be to build something in your resume to show that you know a little bit of machine learning and it's worth giving you a go and go through the interview process.
From my perspective as a recruiter, because I'm often a blocker to get you, in front of a hiring manager. If you put lots of projects that you've done in your free time on your CV, you're constantly doing things to expand your knowledge. That's probably the best way to stand out, because it shows you're proactive in that you're doing what you can to expand your knowledge. And then if that gets you a seat in front of the hiring manager, then it's up to you to impress them at that stage. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
It's good to hear. Yeah, that you're not completely mean.
And then
someone's raising their hand, I see. What's that?
Hey, this is Akanksha. Sorry, I'm going to ask a similar question on the topic which is being discussed. So I am at CERN and I have data science experience of like 7 years. But our projects at CERN is basically the high energy physics. Most of you might be knowing already. So my projects are basically not public. And I have a lot of experience, to be honest. I use RNN and everything, but I do not have something yet to share. Like I do some projects when in my free time, like, I don't know, predicting the car prices or things like that. But these are like, I have started just now. So this transition becomes very, very difficult for me. Even if I send my CV and really saying things like, oh, I have used these machine learning, I have really created myself the architecture, but just saying that I'm from research academics, it just doesn't go through, I feel like. Is there a way?
I can tell you many things about this, actually. So first of all, when I worked for Expedia, the travel agency, 3 of my colleagues were people who used to work in particle physics at CERN, and I hired one of them, so I interviewed him. So I know your background very well, and you can make the transition very easily if you know how to sell your profile. So I don't think anybody will think that your experience isn't good enough. On the contrary. So you can reach out to me in private and I can maybe give you a hand. So my experience with researchers is that sometimes, especially just even the resume, they don't write it for industry, they write it for academia. My first CV when I exited academia was ignored completely by a lot of people because I didn't speak about results, about things I achieved, built. It was more about, oh yes, I wrote 10 papers and they have been cited by this many people. And I think one thing that happens a lot is that because I've been on the other side of the table hiring people, a lot of people are scared that academics will be a little bit up in the air, will have no idea about how to operate in the business world. Sometimes they're right. So there was a data scientist in a company I worked for that he just came from academia and he just went for walks in the woods to seek inspiration, and he would just sit and do meditation and stuff. And he never actually got anything done. So the company was very apprehensive to hire researchers.
Right.
So what you need to do in the interview process is to show that you care about building something that is good for the business. So sometimes, for example, a solution that's not the most elegant or the biggest or the largest neural network, but it does the job. Sometimes that's the best answer in an interview in a company, right? To show that you can build something that is 80% good, but you can build it fast because academics are perfectionists. So those are some of the things that you need to show to make the transition. But I'm absolutely positive that you will be able to make that transition.
Thanks a lot. That's really useful. Thank you.
Okay.
Has anyone else got any questions before we wrap up?
Any tips for interviewing for companies like Meta or Google or Amazon when it comes to data science?
Yeah, I've never worked for any of them. I have interviewed with one of them once. So I don't think it's much. I don't think it's that different, to be honest. A lot of people I know moved from other companies that are not so well known to Meta, or I think it's usually the same process. I honestly don't know any specific. I don't have any specific advice. Again, I think they're very business focused. They focus a lot on experimentation. So I would expect questions about A/B testing, the kind of thing I said about the cities. That kind of problem may appear a lot. So yeah, but I'm sorry that I can't help you much more than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think looks like we're sort of wrapping up. But if anyone came later into the session, these sessions are recorded. So if they want to reach out to me, if they join maybe halfway through, I can send that to you some point next week. I do put these sessions on monthly as well. So I might come in and get in touch with you guys about sort of future sessions that sort of match up with your backgrounds. And if anyone wants the video for any reason, they can reach out. Just email me at billy@ontheshortlist.co.uk or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think I've connected with the majority of you anyway. So yeah, let's just keep in touch. Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for putting the session on. And thanks everyone again for taking the time out your afternoon to attend.